So how do you think the gospel kind of fits into all of that? I know that was
Yeah,
really
yeah, no, I just wanted to
important, but
share that a little bit, but yeah, the gospel fitting into
just generally the
yeah.
issue, you
Well,
know.
I think it's simple. I think you can start by saying love your neighbor.
Yeah.
I think people, for me, I'm always a firm believer in action. You know, when it talks about being a doer in the Word of God, like being a doer of the Word of God, not just a reader. And I just think we have so many people. Of course, people aren't perfect, including myself. We'll get it wrong. We'll make mistakes because we're not Jesus. You know, we're made righteous through faith in Him, and it's His grace that enables us to do what we're supposed to do. And that process, even the new creation process, can be a process. Some things drop off straight away, some things don't, but we go after holiness in the grace of God. And I think that is by starting with love your neighbor. How can you say that you love your neighbor if you're sitting on the fence with an issue like this?
Yeah.
How can you say, yeah, I love Jesus? And something that I've noticed, I guess, is that I've noticed so many Christians, mainly white Christians, I'll be honest, and Christian leaders, just not said a thing about that. But what I also notice is they post about everything else and say that we'll pray for this issue, and this is such a major issue, and we need to deal with poverty over here, and we need to deal with addiction over here, and actually there's prostitution over here and whatever else. But when it comes to racism, when it comes to that area with black people, it just seems to be something it's like the elephant in the room. It's a massive elephant in the room. It always seems to be overlooked. And I guess for me, as far as the gospel, I always ask, well, what would Jesus do? You know, and I fully believe that he would stand against it because he was a man of justice. And God is a God of justice. And also compassion in being with the people when people were treated unfairly. You think about the leper situation. I'm not comparing black people to lepers as such, but in some ways, we are ostracized from society, not
Yeah.
really included and treated equally compared to our counterparts. So when you look at the leper and Jesus even touching him, which was unheard of and unseen at those times, and you know, talking about the importance of love and how to love people, and you know, being I guess having that relationship with people, loving even your enemies, never mind people, but your enemies, going further to. But then I see so many people say that and they act like they believe it, but I don't see them do it, because I'm one of them. Like, if you tell me that you love me, then you have to show me in action, because I've always been like that anyway. Like, you can't say you love me, then everything you don't embody that. Everything about you says the opposite. You don't show me that you love me. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do something every time, but don't tell me that you love me and not show me. And I learn a lot from youth work and working with at-risk young people, with kids that would run away from home, get reported missing, child sex exploitation victims. You had to build up a level of trust, and there had to be a form of love there, professional, godly kind of love. But if they thought for 1 second that I didn't care, they're not interested.
No.
If they thought that I didn't genuinely care, that I didn't have love for them and wanted to genuinely help them, they were not interested. And I think it's the same with the gospel. How can we tell people that we love them and that, yeah, I'll pray for it, and you know, and it's but we're not actually taking action, in the sense of, are we genuinely intentionally praying for this stuff? Like I could do with prayers right now, so many of my brothers and sisters could do with prayers, but I think it's easy. I think there's categories in church as well. I've always said this. I think I hated the idea of church before I was a Christian, because I thought it was middle-class white men. Now think about my experiences of racism. Why would I want to link myself to that? Now, growing up, of course, I've got white friends and black friends and what, but to go into something that I think is predominantly white, why would I want to do that? Knowing my experiences, and you do tend to tarnish other people with the same brush from your experiences until they get to know you and you realize, actually, he's cool. Actually, he views me as a person. The skin color doesn't matter as such. So I think there has to be a Jesus mindset. You can't, I believe that love is an action. It can't just be a word. Because Jesus was a man of action. He wasn't just like, yeah, you just do this, or I'll say this. Like, you know, everything he taught his disciples, he would do. He'd already done, or he was doing it, or he'd do it. And I just think you can't say that kind of stuff and brush over it and say, and I guess a lot of Christians are quite dismissive of it, of just like, yeah, the battle is against, it's not against flesh and blood and this. Well, you know, I know that. I already know that first and foremost, but does that mean that you won't stand with your brothers that are being persecuted? Because it talks about it talks about the persecution of people. It talks about injustice. It talks about standing with people and sitting with people and just being with them. Sometimes it's just being with them and knowing that for them to know that you have their support, I guess. Because for me, I'm a man of justice, in a sense of, if I see injustice of any kind, then it's a problem for me. Being a man of God, then it troubles me. Like, I want to do something about it. So, but I think that does for a lot of Christians, but not this subject, not this area. I think it's often overlooked, and I think it stems from a lack of understanding for some. So some it is just plain ignorance. Some don't want to address it. Some it's just like, I've heard stories without hotting anybody up, and of people that I know that their pastors haven't even contacted them in this time, and they're known in the church, like they've not even contacted them to say, but they've addressed something about, they've messaged them and saying that one of their posts was inappropriate, like it wasn't, and so many others, including loads of white people, said it wasn't inappropriate because it really wasn't. It was just about racism. But why is that the first thing? Why? This is a time you can't get your back up and use your platform or your voice to challenge black people on white privilege. On, if you don't agree with it, like you don't think it's true, then probably keep it to yourself at this time. You can't use your voice to say stuff like, oh, well, all police officers aren't like that. And well, obviously we know that, but is that the angle? Or I heard somebody say, well, even with George Floyd, well, what did he do before it? Like, how does whatever he did before it warrant the death that he received in that moment? And I think if that is your first go-to attitude, you're already missing the point, and you probably are part of the problem. But it's just being able to understand, because I've had so many conversations with so many people, and I've had people admit to me, both, like, I've had conversations with black and white people, but some of my white friends, extended friends, have said, look, Marvin, I really don't get it because I've not experienced it. And that's okay. I'm not going to bite your head off for that. Well, it's not your fault. It's not your experience. But that they're like, but I want to it bothers me. It aggravates my spirit. It breaks my heart. I want to know more. And with that, of course, I can help share what I know to help educate. And that's a beautiful place to be, because it shows a genuine care and concern and a level of compassion to work from, and a desire to understand. Yeah. But I just think there's some that, for a lot of us, and I've seen this across the board, because I've got, a lot of black friends, and in the church as well, in different churches across Manchester, London, wherever, that I've seen so many posts. You look at some of the left celebrities. I've seen one from Lewis Hamilton. He said, doing a summary of it, I guess, summing it up. He was saying basically, look up, all my white friends in the sport, and my other white celebrities have been silent on this issue. And he was basically saying, how he feels isolated, and how it's not right. And I think obviously as Christians, it is slightly different in a sense of, well, we aim to do what Jesus did. We aim to live out the very nature of Jesus. And that, I think that starts with love. And if you're not ready to do that, even if this issue doesn't bother you, as a Christian, white, black, Asian, whatever, you have to ask yourself why. You really got to ask God to examine your heart. Because if you don't, because for me, if it was a white person, an Asian person, it would bother me just as much. It just so happens that it seems to happen to more black people than white and Asian people. So for me, go on.
That's so true. No, I was just going to say, for me, silence is violence. Mm-hmm. And I hate to put it as extreme as that, but the more and more I hear the experiences of my friends, of yourself, of other people, I just think, silence is doing some form of violence, whether it's just as little as making somebody, like Lewis Hamilton was saying, feeling isolated, or the fact that, black people in church feeling ostracized because their leaders aren't speaking out about it. There's, any time that you're silent about an issue of injustice, it's just doing violence, to society, to somebody's heart, to somebody's soul. And, I can't stand by and say, I'm acting like Jesus by committing violence, because Jesus was not non-violent, he was peaceful, but he certainly wasn't silent. He certainly wasn't. And I think there's so many I feel like I could have this conversation with you all day. It's really important.
Yeah,
But it's just funny how you said, it just made me think of the reason why I'm even conscious about this stuff is because somebody shared with me their experience and it broke my heart. And what you were saying about, people messaging and saying, I don't understand, tell me, it disturbs my spirit, it breaks my heart. That is, that is better than silence.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
At least trying to understand, and then maybe after you understand it, you might disagree, or you might think, actually, no, I think it's wrong. But at least you're being humble, like God asks us to be, and that's why I think it's a gospel issue, and a sin issue. At least you're being humble enough to say, actually, I'm not black. I clearly don't understand what's going on. I'm not carrying your level of pain. And even with the situation, with the George Floyd situation, killing him it doesn't matter what he did. That's not the approach that you should take as a police officer.
Yeah.
So that is wrong. We all know that's wrong. So
yeah, no, go on. Yeah, no, I was just going to say that's not an isolated incident. You've got to understand, because in the month of May, there was Ahmaud Arbery, there was Sean Reed, there was Breonna Taylor, and they're just the ones that we know of. There's been loads more, and these resulted in death. Like, you've got to understand that, and this is something across the board. There's, Eric Garner, Philando Castillo. These are names that you can look up. And a lot of them didn't. The police officers didn't get charged with murder. A lot of them got off with it. And how do you have faith in a system that's broken like that? Because, and even with this situation now, you look at, without getting deep into the politics of it, but you look at how long it even took them to arrest the guy, but all the evidence is on film, it's captured. Yeah. But then, did you see the CNN reporter that was black that they arrested, even though he was showing his identification? They arrested him without cause, without any understanding, didn't tell him why he was being arrested. They arrested him immediately. But you're telling me you can't arrest a murdering cop? Like, how does that even make sense? But also in America, it's complicated in certain parts of America. Well, a lot of the states, they have different laws, don't they, to protect police and stuff like that as well. But I just think something I wanted to say really quickly as well. I think because I shared with my friends, a youth pastor, I shared with his youth group yesterday as well. And I was just saying that, because obviously a lot of people are trying to understand. I think some people, white people, are scared of backlash from the black community as well. I just think it's important to say that, to know that I recognise that, as in getting it wrong or saying something wrong, because a lot of people don't really understand it. And for me, I guess it's just the simplicity of that. If you were to share something, to say that, even just saying, I don't agree with this is wrong. Any black person that comes at you with an attitude is a fool. Like, do you know what I mean? They're a fool. Like, they're plain and simple. But I don't think they would. And I think what I've seen is that people are happy, and really, quite thankful that why people will stand with them and show that. And that's what we're asking for, I guess, because the more people that know, the more people that spread awareness and try and fight towards change, the quicker it's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know if you wanted me to mention that situation with the guy on with Facebook, what I posted before.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to get to that because, and maybe you can share it within the story, but I think it would be really good to bring clarity to the idea of Black Lives Matter, because I see a lot online, Black Lives Matter kind of versus all lives matter. And I feel like I understand it, and I am I'm preaching it. Black Lives Matter, full stop.